The sky above Cheongdam-dong was the color of fading steel when Yulong and Yang Mei Mei stepped out of the black van that brought them to the studio. A soft winter wind swept across the narrow streets, carrying the faint scent of roasted chestnuts from a vendor on the corner and pushing loose snowflakes across the pavement like drifting white petals. The city glowed with its typical charm, warm golden lights spilling from boutique stores, soft jazz floating out of a coffee shop, flashes from distant cameras reflecting against wet asphalt, but something about the atmosphere felt different today. There was tension in the air, quiet but unmistakable, as if the world sensed that something long hidden was about to surface. They walked side by side toward the studio entrance, but not hand in hand. Their steps were aligned, yet a small invisible distance lingered between them. It wasn't hostility, it was weight. The weight of years spent living not just as husband and wife, but as symbols of perfection, symbols of romance, symbols of a fairy tale that millions believed in. And now, at last, they had agreed to do something they had avoided for years, speak the truth behind that illusion. It was an exclusive interview. One they did not grant easily. One they had declined many times before. Yet today, something had changed. They had arrived prepared to let the world into part of their marriage no one had ever seen, into shadows that had slowly swallowed a bright image fans adored. Inside the studio, the lighting had been adjusted to create a soft, intimate halo around the interview sofa, giving the illusion of warmth even as the cold outside seeped in through the walls. Staff moved carefully, as if afraid of disturbing the fragile calm hovering over the couple. Mei Mei took her seat first, smoothing her long winter coat before exhaling softly, her breath escaping in a cloud of nervousness. Yulong joined her moments later, sitting with his hands clasped tightly, knuckles pale. They looked beautiful, of course they did. Was did. But today, there was something else lingering in their expressions, vulnerability. For years, the public had painted their marriage in pastel colors, soft, dreamy, cinematic. From red carpet appearances to behind-the-scenes footage, they embodied an elegance that felt effortless. Fans called them the couple written by destiny. Fairy tale that came true. The visual perfection of Asian showbiz, but the truth, as the world was about to learn, was far from the fairy tale everyone believed. When the interviewer greeted them, Mei Mei offered a polite smile. It was graceful, practiced, but dimmer than usual, as if it were carrying the remnants of many silent nights. Yulong's gaze stayed low, focusing on the cup of barley tea placed in front of him. They weren't avoiding the interview. They were bracing themselves. The first questions were gentle, updates on their careers, recent projects, future plans. They responded professionally, almost mechanically. It wasn't until the interviewer softly transitioned with a careful, "Many fans see your marriage as perfect. Has it always been as flawless as it seems?" that the atmosphere shifted. The room fell quiet for a moment long enough for the air to thicken. Then Yang Mei Mei lifted her gaze, and with a small, trembling breath, she finally answered. Perfection was a mask, she whispered, and it became heavier every year. There it was, the first crack in the story the world thought they knew. The interviewer leaned forward gently. Was it difficult? Mei Mei nodded, her voice fragile yet honest. People think fame is glamorous, but the bigger your name becomes, the smaller your life feels. The world sees everything, except your pain. Yulong shifted slightly, his jaw tightening. He hadn't spoken yet, but the weight of her words was written clearly in the tension of his shoulders. Over the next minutes, their carefully constructed image slowly unraveled. Yulong was the first to explain how suffocating fame had become. Couldn't walk down the street with her. Not even once. We had to hide inside cars, inside back entrances, inside hotel corridors. We couldn't be a normal couple. We couldn't be ourselves. They added quietly. Every smile we showed in public had to be perfect. Even when we were tired. Even when we were hurt. The facade the world worshipped was beginning to reveal its cracks. Their schedules, once a source of pride, had become a cage. The work that made them stars also kept them apart. Yulong described filming back-to-back action movies abroad while Mei Mei was tied to a year-long drama contract in Seoul. We sometimes saw each other only 3 or 4 hours a week, he admitted, his voice tightening. Every time I flew home, she was already asleep. Every time she woke up, I was already leaving. Mei Mei looked down at her hands. We were married, but living two separate lives. The interviewer asked a question the audience at home would inevitably wonder, did you talk about it? Mei Mei shook her head slowly. We were both so tired. Too tired to fight. Too tired to fix anything. Too tired to admit we were drifting apart. She paused, then added in a softer voice, sometimes exhaustion can feel like distance. And thus emerged the truth most fans never imagined. Even the most admired couple in the industry had been quietly unraveling, thread by invisible thread. Darkest part, the one that truly shocked fans, came when the couple addressed the pressure from the media. Whenever they showed even the slightest sign of fatigue, reporters spun it as tension. Whenever they looked too happy, blogs exaggerated it as performative. Their love became a product, one constantly evaluated, measured, and dissected. Every gesture became a headline. Every silence became speculation. Mei's eyes glistened as she admitted, I stopped showing my real feelings, because someone would always twist them. Yu Long nodded, adding, I started acting even when the cameras were off. The most heartbreaking confession came next. We forgot how to be real with each other, she whispered. This truth weren't painful enough. They went on to reveal that rumors, vicious, baseless, had carved wounds deeper than either wanted to admit. Mei Mei recalled a time when tabloids claimed Yu Long was secretly meeting a model overseas during a shoot. I didn't believe it, she said softly. Small part of me wondered why he didn't call that night. That one moment of doubt hurt more than any headline ever could. And Yu Long wasn't spared either. Kept linking her with her co-stars, he explained. They wrote that she was happier on set than at home. You're reading something like that every day, you start questioning yourself. You start wondering if you're failing. The wounds weren't dramatic. They weren't explosive. They were quiet, slow, almost invisible, just like real pain often is. It made them even more devastating. One of the most emotional moments in the interview came when Yu Long confessed. There was a time we didn't talk for 10 days. Silence in the room thickened. Mei Mei swallowed hard before adding. We lived under the same roof, but we felt miles apart. She turned slightly toward him, her voice trembling. It wasn't that we stopped loving each other. We just didn't know how to reach each other anymore. The interviewer didn't speak. Did it need to? The story was unraveling itself. Heavy and beautiful in its honesty. As the cameras continued rolling, the couple opened up about the emotional toll of living in constant spotlight. The pressure to appear perfect. The fear of disappointing fans. The expectations that left no room for flaws. No room for weakness. No room for being human. Perfect from the outside. Mei Mei whispered. Broken on the inside. Yu Long reached for her hand, not dramatically. Not for the cameras. But with a quiet sincerity that suggested the two of them had already survived the worst of their darkness. The interview room felt different when the cameras resumed after a brief break. It was as though the air, once heavy with unspoken memories, finally settled into a softer rhythm. Yu Long and Yang Mei Mei sat a little closer now, their shoulders almost brushing. The fragile tension from earlier had loosened enough to reveal something gentle, something resembling relief. They had ripped open the sealed envelope of their past. The world read the sorrow they had hidden for years. The story wasn't just about breaking, it was about rebuilding. And that was the part the world had not yet heard. Outside the studio window, the winter light had shifted into dusky blue. Faint streaks of fading orange stretching across the sky as evening softly descended over Seoul. Lights from passing cars reflected through the glass like floating orbs. Delicate and fleeting. Mei Mei watched them for a moment. Her features softened by the glow. It was almost poetic. Shadows had guided part one of their revelation, but now, under this twilight, something lighter was ready to emerge. When the interviewer asked, how did you find your way back to each other? Mei Mei let out more breath that trembled ever so slightly. Then formed a small smile, fragile, but real. It didn't happen all at once, she said. Healing never does. Yu Long nodded, and for the first time in the entire interview, the corners of his lips curved into a quiet, almost boyish smile. We made mistakes. We avoided hard conversations. We let pressure drown the small joys. One day, we just knew we couldn't keep living like that. It was a night that stained itself into their memory, the kind of night that divides life into before and after. Yu Long recounted it first. Cold evening nearly 2 years ago. When he arrived home from a late-night shoot and found Mei Mei sitting alone at the dining table with the lights off, there were no tears on her face, no anger in her eyes, just a stillness that terrified him more than any argument ever could. "She didn't look at me when I came in," he said softly. "She didn't even realize I was there. She looked lost." For Mei Mei, it had been the culmination of months of exhaustion, loneliness disguised as independence, disappointment disguised as resilience. She had been fighting the battles of their marriage quietly, hoping things would change, hoping he would notice how thin her strength had stretched. "I wasn't angry at him," she whispered. "I was tired of being strong." She looked down as her fingers intertwined with his, an intimate gesture, subtle but overflowing with meaning. That night, she continued, we talked until sunrise. Not about fame. Not about work. Not about the pressure we were under. We talked about us. About how we forgot to protect the most important part of our lives. It was during that conversation that Yulong cried. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But with the quiet ache of a man realizing the gravity of what he almost lost. Mei Mei, hearing him break for the first time, felt her own walls crumble. The moment he cried, she said, "I knew we still had a chance." From that night onward, everything changed, but gradually, intentionally. With a softness that mirrored the slow mending of a delicate fabric. They began writing letters to each other once a week. Texts. Not voice memos. Tears, ink on paper. Emotions poured out slowly, honestly. Sometimes they wrote about their nightmares. Sometimes about their dreams. Sometimes simply to say I missed you today. They left the letters in each other's coat pockets. On the kitchen counter, under pillows. Words became their way back to each other. Their schedules also shifted, not dramatically, but with mindful adjustments. Yulong turned down 2 overseas projects he knew would take him away for months at a time. Mei Mei requested shorter filming days and paused her involvement in back-to-back variety shows. They reclaimed pockets of time, morning breakfasts, late-night walks, quiet dinners at home, small fragments of ordinary life they had once sacrificed without realizing the cost. Media scrutiny didn't disappear. They learned to stop performing for cameras. If they were tired, force smiles. If they didn't feel like holding hands in public, they didn't pretend. Authenticity became a shield stronger than any PR narrative. When tabloids speculated that their spark was fading, they didn't respond with a staged photo op. They simply lived their truth privately. And in that quiet, the spark they feared had dimmed slowly reignited in a way that felt deeper and more adult than before. But perhaps the turning point of their healing was a trip, unexpected, unplanned, and desperately needed. Mei Mei, who suggested they escape to Jeju Island. To the luxury resorts they usually stayed at? To a small guest house near Seopjikaji. Surrounded by silence and open sky. The ocean there was wild in winter. Waves crashing fiercely against the volcanic rocks. About its rawness mirrored the state of their hearts. Their second night. Wrapped in thick coats. They walked along the cliffside path lit only by the moon. No fans. No cameras. No schedules. No expectations. Just the two of them. Breathing the same cold air. Holding hands that felt unfamiliar and familiar all at once. They found a bench overlooking the sea. It was there, under a cloud-dusted sky, that they talked again for hours. About fear. About disappointment. About a version of themselves they had betrayed in the pursuit of perfection. Yulong confessed he often felt unworthy of her. Mei Mei admitted she sometimes felt invisible next to his success. The emotions were raw. But they were real. Honesty washed over them like a tide. At some point, Yulong said in the interview. She leaned on my shoulder and whispered. Let's stop trying to be perfect. Just love each other, and that was it. That was the moment we found our way back. After Jeju, something inside their marriage softened. Not magically, but gradually, like snow melting into spring. Implemented what they called their rules of staying real. They would never end a day without speaking. They would apologize without pride. They would listen without interrupting. They would choose each other above public expectations. And above all, they would never again confuse looking happy with being happy. The interviewer, visibly moved, asked what hurt the most in their journey. Yulong's answer was immediate. Knowing she cried alone. Mei Mei's answer came seconds later. Watching him suffer silently because he didn't want to worry me. Love wasn't the problem. Silence was. And once they broke that silence, everything else began to align. By the time the interview reached its final stretch, the atmosphere had transformed into something almost serene. Their hands stayed linked. Their eyes carried the steady glow of two people who had not only survived their private storm, but emerged with a deeper understanding of each other. Outside, night had fallen completely, casting Seoul in soft shades of navy and gold. The city looked peaceful, calmer than usual, as if honoring the truth a couple had finally released to the world. When the interviewer asked if they were afraid of how fans would react, Mei Mei smiled. A smile infused with vulnerability and resolution. "Our story helps someone else feel less alone," she said. "Then sharing it is worth it." Yu Long nodded. "We are not perfect. Don't want to be. We want to be human." The cameras slowly zoomed out, capturing the couple sitting closely together, fingers intertwined, breathing in sync. There was no staged affection, no forced emotion. What existed between them now was something quieter but infinitely stronger, an honesty that could hold the weight of their marriage. Stood to leave, they didn't rush. They walked side by side, closer than when they arrived. Under the studio's warm corridor lights, Yu Long gently brushed her hair behind her ear, small, tender, instinctive. Mei Mei leaned into the touch with a soft, familiar affection. They stepped out into the cold Seoul night. This time, they didn't hide. They didn't lower their heads. They didn't speed their steps. They walked slowly, hand in hand, letting the city see not a perfect couple, but a real one. The final narration for the feature wrote itself. Their truth shocked fans, not because it was dark, but because it was real. And in that honesty, their love found its way home.